Welcome back to A Bite from the Money Sandwich, where we provide practical and easy to understand tips and ideas on how to manage your money better, so as to let you retire with comfort and on your own terms. With the cost of education continually on the rise, it is sometimes daunting for a young couple or family to plan how best to pay for their children's education. Luckily, there is help. Today, I'm joined by Gerard Bailey, who is a business development manager at Futurity Investment Group. Gerard explains the benefits of education bonds and why I believe they are the best kept secret of investment bonds and a great alternative for investing when there is an education need, especially with some great tax benefits. Well, welcome, Gerard, to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Now, when we always talk about products, I actually like to talk about the value they can provide rather than actually the product itself. But what I really found interesting about this was you were telling me some great stuff about this product that, I didn't realize, and I'm sure most of the people listening wouldn't know about. So do you want to just give us a bit of fill-in about the product?
Yeah, look, so I work for a company called Futurity Investment Group, and we offer an education bond. So an education bond's been around for probably, well over 50 years. And it is quite an unknown product, particularly, in the past, it was a product used by young couples or young families looking to save money for their children's education. Okay, so if we do on that, and there's definitely been some problems with those education plans in the past, because if you needed the money, it was locked away because it was only for that one purpose. That's not this product, is it? No, that's correct, Mark. So yeah, the products in the past, a couple of them were quite narrow in that if the funds weren't used for education, that only capital was returned, and not always the earnings were returned to the investors. Okay, and one of the things I do like about this, because if you actually know, and we'll just do this as a practical example, if you've got young children or grandchildren, and you know that high school is 10, 12 years away, that if you actually start putting some money away now and allowing compounding interest, if you've got a decent return, that can nearly pay for half the eventual school fees. Yeah, look, that's correct, Mark. So, and it may, if there's enough money invested, it may well cover more than the school fees. And we're finding today that a lot of grandparents are assisting their children with their grandchildren's education. So, and they're investing lump sums. The benefit of the education bond, quite simply, is that if the earnings from the fund are used for an education purpose, the tax paid on those earnings is refunded to the bond owner. Okay, so do you want to just a practical example of that? So if someone is putting in $1,000 a month, so there's $10,000 or $12,000 a year, and then after about 5 years, there's for $70,000 or $80,000, so there's $80,000, and they want to actually take some money out under the traditional insurance bonds, the interest would be taxable on that if it's under 10 years. So how does this differ on this? Yeah, absolutely. So the investment bond, at the heart of what our education bond is, an investment bond. So the 10-year rule can be used later on. However, if it's used for an education purpose, those earnings can be withdrawn at any time to pay an education expense. So is there any time that they maybe have to pay tax at a future date? Or is and what I'm sort of getting at is, well, sometimes life just changes and your child may not go to that particular school, or you may not need that money for that. You need it for some other purpose. Yeah, so after 10 years, it is a fully tax-paid investment bond. The 10-year rule does apply. So those funds can be withdrawn anytime after 10 years, fully tax-paid. When an education benefit claim is made, therefore, to note that those earnings or the money paid is taxable in the hands of the beneficiary. So there are some things to understand, but generally speaking, it is a very efficient way to have the tax paid, or the taxation paid that your earnings have, or the tax that your earnings have paid, having that refunded to you. And what if your intention is to actually use it for your children's education, but for whatever reason you can't use it for that? Something happens, some emergency. Is there a problem you now have to pay tax on that investment? No, that's right, Mark. So the education bond, when Treasury made the tax, it sits on the Tax Act. So therefore it's worded into the Tax Act, or hardwired, if you like. Capital can be withdrawn for any purpose at any time as a capital only withdrawal at any stage. So well within the 10 years, if that's needed. The Treasury Department, when they've made the law, understand that people's situations do change, and the main benefit or the refund of the earnings is made for an education purpose. But yes, you're right. You can access capital at any stage in that, or outside of 10 years, it's a fully tax-paid investment under the old 10-year bond rules.
Okay, so if for some reason you can't use it, there is actually, as long as the intention was when you first took it out that you wanted to use it for education, but if life happens, as you said, and you're not going to get penalised by it.
Yeah, you're 100% correct on that, Mark. Life does happen, and if the circumstance does change, that you will receive your earnings after 10 years. So there's no obligation to have that for education. It just comes out as a tax-paid investment bond.
And for people, I'm trying to think of examples for people. For example, they might have their money in their superannuation, or they made contributions and they've received an inheritance or something like that. And you are limited how much you can put into super, because for most people, having that tax-free haven of superannuation once you're retired is so important, but you are limited. So insurance bonds, instead of just leaving your money in a bank, seems to be a great alternative.
Yeah, look, insurance bonds, or in this case, education bonds. So to go back to your previous question as well, there has to be an intention for education. Okay, so but as you said, circumstances can change. So and the government's very aware of that. So, but we're finding lots of grandparents making lump sums. They might have excess in superannuation. The bond pays is the tax entity, so it's not taxable. The tax is not paid by the bond owner. So if they're putting money aside for their grandchildren and they don't want to create additional taxable income for themselves, they might find an education bond a useful alternative, particularly if they've exceeded their superannuation caps, or if they're too old to put money into superannuation.
Yeah, that's right, because there's a working test after a certain period of time that you got to do to make contributions. I imagine, because I did read somewhere, it's quite amazing that, sometimes private school fees, up to like 60% of the fees are paid for by grandparents, not the parents.
Yeah, that's a significant number. It's very close to the number that I've seen as well. The number that we're talking about, it is significant, well over 50%. And that the data I had, that it's paid from an entity not in the parent's name. So that might be grandparents, it might be a family trust, it might be separated parents. But the data that we have is quite clear that more than half of private school fees are being paid from an entity that's not in the child's name.
And what happens, for example, if it is the grandparents have put this bond together for their grandchild for education, but then they pass away? These bonds do have really good estate planning advantages, if I remember rightly.
Absolutely. So intergenerational wealth transfers without tax implications, access to capital at any time for any purpose. The bond proceeds are distributed to their chosen nominees on a tax-free basis. And the bond can continue after the death of the bond owner with some significant tax advantages, whereby once the money becomes testimonial, that there's an even greater taxation advantage for the education benefit claim.
Yeah, excellent. So it seems to be one of these well-kept secrets, because I didn't know about this. I'm sure very few people listening would have known about this. But as you said, they've been around a long time. How does someone find out about them?
Well, look, you can look at the Futurity futurityinvest.com website. There's information there. We're not the only provider of an educator. There's another provider in the market. You can speak to your advisor if you've got one, or as I said, give us a call on the number from the website. And from a lot of schools now, whether that be providing information for education bonds. That it is I wouldn't say it's a well-kept secret, but I certainly would say there is not a lot of awareness out there in the community. As you mentioned right at the start, some of the bonds earlier were quite narrow in their offerings, and so people may have look for other alternatives. Superannuation's always been a great option, but now with the increase in wealth of the baby boomer generation coming through, and they do have significant excess capital, that they are trying a lot more to provide assistance to their children and their grandchildren with that education cost.
And I'm just even thinking of an example now of someone who's downsizing, moving out of a capital, one of the major cities, and may have some money left over after that. And yes, you can only put so much into your superannuation, even though there is also the downsizer rules, if you should look that up. But if you've got some spare cash, you don't want to sit it in a bank account earning virtually very low interest rates. This would be a really good opportunity or really good alternative to superannuation.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned to you earlier, whereby elderly or retired people inheriting money from siblings, and it's quite, these days in Sydney or Melbourne, where a lot of houses, it's not uncommon to get for a 70-year-old to inherit $1 million from a sibling that's passed away without children. Where does that money get invested? Here's just an alternative. Number one, it's testamentary money. Number two, they're not giving it away to grandchildren or investing it in a taxable environment. They have the opportunity, should they need to, withdraw capital for other purpose that they didn't, foresee at the time of making the investment. If that money's put into the general investment market, should they need to withdraw funds in 5-10 years' time, they would face the normal CGT and other taxation implications that may come. So, and there's a whole bunch of different strategies that are used, but we're certainly seeing an increase in, number one, the awareness of the education bond, and certainly when clients are looking, particularly, it's not just seen as a savings plan for education.
Yeah, and you're saying about case studies. I imagine there's case studies on the website and all that, so people can see if this applies to them. An example. Yeah,
absolutely. If you jump onto the website at futurityinvest.com, you will see some different examples, the PDS, and there's a whole range of different information available on there.
Okay, so. And I think it really is important to emphasise it's not money locked away for 10 years. If you need that money in 1 year's time, 2 years' time, yes, it might take 5 days because you've got to apply and it takes it to put the money into your bank account, but it is accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we mentioned before, access to capital at any time for any purpose with some great tax-paid investing with special 30% education tax benefit when it's used for education.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gerard. So just in summary, yes, if you're retiring, superannuation is still going to be your best investment, but there is limitations how much you can put that. You may want to keep access to it. So, for children or grandchildren for schooling, this just seems a great alternative with great tax benefits than just putting your money sitting in a bank.
Yeah, look, absolutely. So once again, be aware that, the education tax benefit is taxable in the hand of the beneficiary. So if they're a minor and the money is not testamentary money, there may be some consideration, or there are considerations that you need to be aware of. But the information's available in that regard. But generally, it's a great alternative for investing when there is an education need from either, and it's not just for grandchildren's education. Their children might go and do a master's. The retired clients might be doing further education. People are enrolling for courses at any age these days.
Well, okay. You've just raised a really good point because, in my mind, I was still thinking kids going through high school, but absolutely education at any age. So, excellent. Thank you for that. And I actually think we've covered a lot on this territory. We'll have the links to all the information on the website, which I think if anyone is interested should just go on the website, look at some of the case studies, get the information. This is definitely not advice. We're not recommending any products. I just saw this as a need that for the first time, I didn't realize some of these education tax benefits that are there. And I just thought people should know about it. So one thing I do ask all our guests is, the best piece of advice they've ever heard, because just, it's something you've heard in your past for work or life that you may want to share with the listeners.
Well, it's not really, applicable to an investment strategy or so forth, Mark. But when I was 18, my dad took me to buy a beer for me for my first time. And he said, Gerard, always buy the first beer.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I could see how that would work. That's a great piece of advice, actually. I think that's a great piece of Australian advice as well, too, Gerard. Okay. It's been great having you on the show and appreciate you giving me all the information you have.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to know more about Gerard and education bonds, visit www.futurityinvest.com.au and search for education bonds. Feel free to also email me on admin@themoneysandwich.com or visit our website themoneysandwich.com if you have any questions or would want to know more. Want more practical, easy to understand tips and action lists to help with your money stuff? The latest version of my book, The Money Sandwich, is now available to order on Booktopia and Amazon, as well as available at all popular bookstores. Everyone deserves to retire comfortably and on their own terms. Make this the year you take action. As with every podcast, this information is not advice, as not personalised to your own situation. And past performance is never guaranteed for the future. What we are trying to do here is to provide tips, coaching and education to help improve your money knowledge, which we believe can only be a good thing. See you next time when we take another bite from the Money Sandwich.